In recent years, pediatric science has been changing.
Between the time of the first trial and the second trial, the science of shaking baby changed. They don't like to refer to it as shaking baby syndrome anymore.
For 20 years, we were implicating shaking for just about every injury that we're seeing, particularly in the young infants.
Pediatric radiologist Patrick Barnes was a key prosecution witness in the most famous shaken baby case of all, the trial of Louise Woodward. Woodward was a 19-year-old nanny charged in 1997 with shaking an 8-month-old baby to death, hitting his head and causing fatal bleeding. With Barnes' help, Woodward was found guilty of second-degree murder. The case would be a turning point for Barnes.
I was really affected by all of that and began to question my role as a pediatric radiologist and a neuroradiologist as part of the child abuse team in these particular cases. Shaking was irrelevant in that case, in retrospect.
But it was clear that something had happened to the child.
The child had an impact injury. You can't get a skull fracture from shaking. You can't get a wrist fracture from shaking.
But the prosecution's theory was this child was shaken.
That's correct, and at that time, that was my theory going into that case based on my previous 20 years of experience in child abuse and accepting shaken baby syndrome.
For decades, when Barnes and others saw bleeding in the eyes and bleeding and swelling on the brain, they assumed it was shaken baby syndrome. Many doctors still stand by the diagnosis, but now, Barnes says, science is proving the old assumptions wrong.
When we started using more advanced imaging techniques such as MRI, we started realizing there were a number of medical conditions that can affect a baby's brain and look like the findings that we used to attribute to shaken baby syndrome or child abuse.
If you were called to testify in the Woodward case today, what would you say?
I would say that this is most likely a traumatic impact injury, that I would not be considering shaking, that this could be accidental, just as it could be non-accidental or abusive. And I would say that you cannot select out, accuse, indict, or convict any particular caretaker based on the medical evidence that we have.